I never thought I'd witness a middle-aged woman in a pink tracksuit, looking like she was on her way to a Tai Chi session, rip a federal court order with a red stamp right in front of me before the deputy sheriff could even finish pinning up the next page. But it happened, and it wasn't out of sudden rage. It was calm, deliberate, very Karen. At that moment, I gripped my hot coffee so tightly I nearly shattered the mug. I stood still, my whole body trembling, not from fear, but from anger. A deep, cold, controlled anger. Because I knew I was recording everything. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just stared straight at her and held the camera steady. A part of me whispered, she just signed her own arrest warrant. Karen, or as everyone in the neighborhood called her, the eternal HOA president, had torn up a federal court order right in front of a law enforcement officer and right in front of my lens. I could picture her face, smug, triumphant, believing her HOA rules could override state law. She had no idea that as she peeled each paper from the fence, she wasn't just removing words. She was clearing the path for me to expose every dirty secret she'd been hiding under the sun of legality. What Karen didn't know was that I was no longer alone. I had the law. I had the evidence. And this time, I had set the trap. It all started on a perfect morning. Tuesday. The sky was crystal clear. Sunlight spilled across the front yard like honey. I stood barefoot on the porch, toes touching the warm wood, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, and took a deep breath. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the chlorine from someone's pool in the distance. No cars, no Karen, just me and 3 blinding orange signs taped to the brand new fence. 3 tiny signs. But to me, they were victory. Each one bore a bold black message. Court order, do not remove. Not pretty. In fact, kind of ugly. But to me, they were more beautiful than any painting, because they marked the end of a 6-month war with the HOA from hell, and I, a regular resident, had won. My name is Michael. I'm an engineer, living with my girlfriend Sarah. She's a night shift nurse, strong and kind. We moved into this neighborhood over 2 years ago. Lakeside Meadows. It sounded peaceful. Little lake, green grass, nice houses. But no one told me about Karen. She was the president of the HOA, the Homeowners Association, or as I like to call her, the crownless tyrant. 10 years in the chair. No one dared replace her. No one dared to run. Because Karen ruled as if she were mayor of a tiny kingdom where even the smallest misstep came with a fine. Wrong color doormat? Fine. Christmas lights up too early? Fine. Garden hose rolled the wrong way? Believe it or not? Fine. For those she liked, Karen allowed second-story additions. No permits needed. For those she didn't, even a tree branch stretching into a neighbor's yard would earn you a warning letter. Me, I didn't fit from the start. I was younger than most folks here, no kids, never attended her barbecues. But my biggest crime? I wasn't afraid of her. The first time I got fined was for planting a non-native species. It was a white daisy. I didn't argue. I printed out the state's native plant guide, highlighted daisy, and mailed it back. From then on, Karen had it out for me. Things truly exploded when I discovered she had moved the boundary marker in my backyard. 3 meters. Not much, but it was land I had paid for, and it was where the beautiful old oak tree stood, the very reason I bought this house. I confronted Karen. She just smiled, a smug little smirk like I was some kind of fool. "That's my backyard," she said. "I've been planting flowers there for 10 years. And just like that, the war began. I used to think that if I followed the law, I wouldn't be bothered. I was wrong. The moment I hired a surveyor to remeasure the boundary lines, I knew this wasn't about 3 meters of land anymore. This was about control. The map was clear. The oak tree was on my property. The old markers had been shifted. I brought the updated survey and property records to Karen. She glanced at them, then smiled. A smug, dismissive smile, as if I'd just handed her a child's crayon drawing. "This means nothing," she said. "That land's been mine for 10 years. Paperwork doesn't change reality." I didn't argue. I filed a formal complaint with the county court. Karen didn't wait. She struck first. 1 week later, I got a letter from the HOA. It claimed I was in violation of construction codes, even though I hadn't built a thing. At the same time, she filed a notice accusing me of improper tree placement and slapped a warning on my front door. That's when I understood. Karen wasn't playing by the rules. She was weaponizing the HOA, turning it into a machine of personal harassment. My lawyer's name was Dave, quiet, razor sharp. He read the file, looked up, and said one sentence: "She's abusing her authority." But don't lose your cool. We have evidence. The battle lasted 6 months. Karen used HOA funds to hire a city attorney. She framed the case as a boundary dispute that concerns the entire community. We were hit with a barrage of counterclaims: survey possibly fraudulent, oak tree threatening the structural integrity of her home, boundary markers not legally recognized, and of course, I was creating a safety disturbance in the neighborhood. Each counterclaim was a delay tactic, a drawn-out game, costly, draining. But I documented everything, saved every email, filmed every time she stepped onto my land. I didn't give up. On court day, Karen arrived in a hot pink blazer, high heels, and an expression like she was headed to brief the Pentagon. Her lawyer came armed with flashy documents and polished language. But then, the court needed only 15 minutes to review the official boundary map. The judge, an older woman with eyes sharp as needles, banged her gavel and spoke clearly. Defendant is in the wrong. Plaintiff wins. A new fence shall be erected on the official property line. Court notices must be posted on said fence for 90 days. Any violations will be prosecuted under criminal law. I won. I thought that was the end. But no, that was just the beginning of a bigger war. 3 days later, I put up the new fence as ordered. I taped 3 glaring neon orange signs on it, each boldly stating, "Court order, do not remove." I hadn't even finished my morning coffee when Karen showed up. She wore a detergent blue tracksuit, hair tied up like a motorcycle helmet, phone in hand. Behind her were her 2 sons, Chad, built like a walking refrigerator, and Brad, skinnier but equally unpleasant. All 3 marched straight up to the fence. I was still seated, coffee in hand, eyes locked on them. "This signage violates Section 12, Clause C of the HOA rules," Karen said sweetly, her voice like artificial honey. I replied calmly, "That's a court order. It has a red federal seal, not an HOA bulletin." She laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh. "Court laws don't matter here. HOA law is the real law." And with that, Karen reached out and ripped the first sign, crumpled it, tossed it to the ground. I didn't stand. I picked up my phone and hit record. Red light on, camera rolling. I looked her straight in the eye. No fear, no anger. I said just one sentence: "You just violated a court order, and I have the evidence." Karen tore down the third sign without even blinking. Her 2 sons, Chad and Brad, stood beside her, arms crossed, smirking like they were watching a play. I didn't say a word, just kept the camera on her, silent. The quieter I was, the more her true colors showed. When she was done, Karen dusted her hands off like she'd just wiped away some dirt. "You'll be receiving a violation notice today," she said with a crooked smile, "for building a non-compliant fence, unauthorized signage, and hostile behavior." Then the 3 of them turned and walked off, right across my lawn as if it were public land. I stayed seated, heart pounding, not from fear, but because I knew I had just captured priceless evidence. 2 hours later, I received a thick envelope from the HOA, heavy paper, color print, gold embossed logo. Definitely not a barbecue invitation. Inside were 3 fines, $500 each. Unauthorized signage, the very sign mandated by court order. Non-compliant fencing. Built exactly as the judge instructed. Hostile conduct toward HOA president during routine inspection, aka when Karen ripped the signs in front of my eyes. Total $1,500. I stared at the number, then back at the paper. Not because I was worried about the money, but because I now held something Karen never expected: a trail of violations. Clear. Documented. Sarah, my girlfriend, came home as I was sitting on the porch, stunned. "What's going on?" I didn't answer, just handed her the letter. She skimmed through it. Her eyes widened. "This is a joke, right? She's fining you for doing exactly what the court told you to do?" I nodded. Sarah looked at me, her expression growing serious. "What are you going to do?" I spoke slowly, each word sharp and measured. "I'm not paying a cent, and I'm going to handle this her way." At the bottom of the fine notice, in small italicized print, it said, "Homeowners may appeal during the next HOA board meeting." I chuckled. Classic Karen move. I knew what she had in mind. A formal meeting where she sat at the head of the table, her loyal yes men nodding along to every word. A trap. But this time, I was walking in with weapons. For the next week, I didn't fix the car, didn't mow the lawn. I turned the dining table into a war room. I printed a copy of the court order with the federal seal, photos of Karen tearing down the signs, screenshots from my video. My legal bills from the boundary dispute, close to $9,000. Email correspondence with the HOA office confirming all construction was done after the ruling. I sealed each document in transparent sleeves, filed them in a leather briefcase like a seasoned attorney, not to present, to strike. The evening before the hearing, I saw Vinny, my elderly neighbor who decorates his lawn with plastic flamingos, installing a solar-powered hula girl statue. I walked over. "Getting ready for battle?" he asked, eyeing my briefcase. "Yep," I said. "I'm going to show her she can't trample the law and walk away." Vinny gave a slow nod, eyes heavy with caution. "Be careful, kid. She doesn't fight fair. People have been kicked out of this neighborhood just for standing up to her." I smiled, softly but firmly. "I'm not going to protest her. I'm going to expose her." The HOA board meeting was held in the community center, a small beige-painted building that smelled of old paper and cheap coffee. A long table covered in a faded purple cloth sat at the center. At its head, Karen sat like a queen, chin lifted high, eyes brimming with challenge. To her left was Bob, a retired accountant, vacant stare. To her right sat Martha, the type of woman who looked like she might burst into tears if someone sneezed too loudly. Lastly, Gary, polo shirt, head nodding on loop like a dashboard bobblehead. Behind the table stood Karen's sons, Chad and Brad, arms crossed like bodyguards. I walked in, alone. Black leather briefcase in hand, holding all the evidence I had gathered. I didn't look at anyone, didn't nod. I sat in the front row, silent. Every move I made was slow, deliberate. Karen banged the gavel. The meeting began. They rambled for 20 minutes. Landscaping budget, paint color samples, and an unapproved koi pond project. I waited, quiet, until Karen looked up and said in her sweetest voice, "Next item, appeal from resident Michael Turner regarding 3 major violations at 112 Oak Drive." She glanced at me like I was a truant student. "Mr. Turner, do you have anything to present before we proceed to a vote?" This was the moment she'd been waiting for. Me stumbling up, mumbling a defense, getting dismissed, leaving humiliated. But I wasn't playing by her script. I stood, walked to the tiny podium in front of the board, placed my briefcase on it, unlatched it. The room fell completely silent. I looked straight at Karen. No shaking, no anger. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to remind you of a few very simple facts." I pulled out the first document, a large, full-color photo. This is a photograph of the HOA president, Karen, tearing down a court-ordered sign, legally posted in accordance with a judge's ruling. This act of vandalism took place last Wednesday at 9:12 a.m. I have the video. This is a still frame, very clear. I held up the photo for the room to see. Martha covered her mouth. Bob blinked rapidly. A few residents in the back began whispering. Karen scoffed. "I removed unauthorized signage. No one is allowed to post anything on HOA property without board approval." I nodded. Slowly pulled out the second document. "Then, let's look at the court order." This document, issued by the county court and signed by Judge Wallace, clearly states, Mr. Turner is authorized to construct a fence along the confirmed boundary line and must display official court signage for a minimum of 90 days. I held up the court order at chest height. Heavy paper, embossed red seal. I held it long enough for every eye to land on it. To summarize, I built the fence because the court ordered it. I posted the signs because the court required it. And Karen, the HOA president, deliberately violated that legal directive. The room fell into absolute stillness. I paused for a moment, scanning the board. Martha's eyes were darting. Gary began to frown. Bob finally looked down at his copy of the agenda like something had just clicked. My voice sharpened. "And now, I'm being fined $1,500 for following the law. I ask you, is this community governance, or is it abuse of power? Is this about protecting the neighborhood, or punishing someone who dared to say no to Karen?" Karen slammed her palm on the table. "You're disrupting the meeting. This isn't a courtroom." I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye. "But you've turned this HOA into your personal court for 10 years now, haven't you?" Then I turned to the rest of the board, my tone even, unwavering. "If you vote to uphold these fines, you are endorsing the violation of a court order, the weaponization of the HOA against private citizens, lies in front of this entire community. And I won't just sue Karen. I will file suit against the entire HOA board for enabling misconduct and violating the law." The room froze. Only the soft hum of the ceiling AC broke the silence. I didn't wait for their reply. I neatly packed the documents into my briefcase, locked it, walked calmly toward the door. Just before reaching the exit, I stopped. Without turning back, I said, I didn't come here to beg for fairness. I came to remind you that justice still exists. And if I can't find it in this room, I'll find it in court. I opened the door and stepped outside. The early winter air hit my face, sharp and cold. But my chest was warm. Very warm. I knew Karen wouldn't stop. I had walked out of that HOA meeting like a victor, but in my mind, only one thought echoed. A cornered animal is always the most dangerous. And I was right. A week later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find a man in a wrinkled suit holding a thick envelope. He said nothing, just handed it to me and walked away. I opened it. Inside was a civil summons. Karen, on behalf of the HOA, was suing me on 4 counts. Defamation and character assassination. Damaging property by erecting an ugly, disruptive fence. Severe emotional distress caused to her and the HOA board, and most importantly, a request to nullify the previous court ruling and force me to remove the fence. I stood there, papers in hand. The sun was still shining, birds chirped in the trees, but I felt cold. Not from fear, but because I knew this was a real war now. I called my lawyer, Dave. After I explained everything, he let out a long sigh. Michael, this is a slap suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. They know they'll lose, but they want to drain you. Court fees, legal costs, time, it's death by exhaustion. I nodded. Dave asked, want me to negotiate a settlement? Karen might drop everything if you promise not to countersue. I looked around the room. A photo of Sarah and me hung on the wall. Her smiling face, taken during a vacation, before all of this began. Then I shook my head. No, Dave. I'm not stopping. Not for offense, for justice. If I back down, she'll do this to someone else. Over and over. My voice dropped lower. I want to file a countersuit. I want a full investigation into the HOA's finances. I want every receipt Karen ever signed turned over. Dave was quiet for a moment, then replied, calm but firm. Then we go hunting. I'll file a counterclaim and request discovery. That means the HOA must surrender everything. Finances, contracts, receipts, meeting logs. You ready for this? I said, I've been ready since the day she ripped that sign down. 2 weeks later, Dave's office received 12 boxes of HOA financial documents, invoices, bank statements, contractor agreements, meeting minutes, all reeking of rot and corruption. I turned our dining room into a war room. Even after long shifts, Sarah sat with me, examining every number, every line. Then we began to see the first cracks, thousands of dollars funneled to a company named Prestige Property Management. No address, no phone number, no source contracts, monthly consulting fees of $3,000 to $5,000 paid consistently for years. I started digging. There was no legally registered company by that name in the state database. Then, Vinny, my neighbor, casually mentioned a rusty old truck parked outside Karen's house years ago. It had Prestige Home Solutions written on the side. I followed the lead, and I found it. A shell company, registered under the name Karen Sikorsky, Karen's maiden name. Sole owner, bank account linked. We dug deeper. HOA money had been transferred into the shell company. From there, used to pay for a new car, rent for her son Chad's luxury apartment, and other shady transactions, cash withdrawals, spa treatments, vacations. The final piece came from Brad, her younger son. In an old email thread, he had once asked, why is the HOA money being sent to that company? I can't find any contract. Karen's reply, shut up, not your business. That's your only warning. I knew it was time to act. I approached Brad gently. No threats, no accusations. I showed him everything, the documents, the transfers, the email. And I said one sentence, you can be a witness or an accomplice, your choice. Brad was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. On the day of the preliminary hearing, Karen arrived looking as proud as ever. Chad was with her. But Brad sat next to me. Dave stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, we have a new witness, and we have submitted all HOA financial records, along with evidence of fraud to the Economic Crimes Division. Karen turned pale. Chad growled. The entire courtroom went silent. Brad stood, voice soft but clear. I'm willing to testify. I can't stay quiet any longer. Karen screamed. Chad lunged toward me. Court officers restrained him immediately. The scene was straight out of a TV drama. When I walked out of court that day, Karen had been arrested for financial misconduct and fraud. Chad faced assault charges right there in the courtroom. I stood in the parking lot. The wind blew gently. In my hand was a cup of coffee. Hot, simple, just like that first morning. The fence still stood. The orange signs were still there. But now they weren't just a court order. They were a symbol of truth, of freedom, and of justice, claimed not just by me and Sarah, but by our entire neighborhood. A few weeks after the trial, my neighborhood was eerily quiet. No more red-inked violation letters shoved under doors. No more judgmental stares. No more sightings of a woman in a pink tracksuit inspecting everyone's doormats. Karen and Chad had been arrested. Brad, thanks to his cooperation, received a suspended sentence and moved out of town. The entire former HOA board resigned in unison. One morning, I stepped out onto the porch. Sarah sat beside me, teacup in hand, her eyes soft and light. I looked out at the fence. The 3 orange signs, now faded by the sun, were still there, the edges curled, the ink slightly smeared. But I hadn't taken them down. To me, they weren't signs of conflict anymore. They were monuments of justice. I had asked myself this question many times. Where's the line between justice and revenge? Now, I know the answer. Revenge satisfies anger. Justice ends pain, not just for you, but for everyone. I didn't go through all of this just for 3 meters of land. I did it to end an era where one woman's abuse of power could intimidate an entire community. If you're watching this video, if you've ever been bullied by a Karen, crushed by an abusive system, or even just silently endured an injustice while others looked away, don't stay silent. You are not alone. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it will come if you stand up the right way at the right time. And if you think this story deserves to be heard, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Every bit of engagement from you is like striking a gavel of justice, making it sound echo a little farther. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you on the next journey.